possible jail term.
The Truth Commission had thrown down the gauntlet, and its chairman, Archbishop Desmond Tutu, went personally to lay charges before the Attorney General against P.W. Botha for refusing to appear before them. A refusal which could cost the former president 2 years in prison. But the Commission had blundered. The Attorney General said the subpoena had a legal defect and would have to be reissued. It gives Mr. Botha a breathing space, but the Commission isn't giving up.
This is a very, very serious matter. We're talking in terms of imprisonment or fines, and that's the very last thing that the Commission is interested in. What it wants to do is to get the information from Mr. Botha, which we think he has.
P.W. Botha was president during the apartheid era of the 1980s. The Commission want to question him about activities of the much-feared State Security Council, which he headed. But the former president has described the Commission as a circus to which he'd refused to bow the knee, reiterating defiance he'd expressed 2 years ago.
I'm not going to the Truth Commission. I am not going to repent. I am not going to ask for favors. What I did for my country.
Mr. Botha asserts that his regime were fighting a just war against communism. He steadfastly refused to release Nelson Mandela, who served 27 years in jail before he was freed by F.W. de Klerk, who succeeded to Botha's presidency. Archbishop Tutu says the Truth Commission isn't sniffing for Mr. Botha's blood. But after 9 days grilling Winnie Mandela about her role in alleged torture and murders during the apartheid era, they wanted to be seen to be treating everybody equally. Gary Lloyd, Sky News.
On the line from Johannesburg now is Sky's correspondent David Chater. David, hello. What's the likelihood, do you think, of P.W. Botha taking the witness stand?
Good afternoon, Frank. He is determined at the moment that he will not appear before what he is calling a circus. He says the Truth and Reconciliation Commission is conducting a witch hunt for the apartheid-era leaders. And he says that his lawyers will answer all questions, but only in written form. Now, the Commission think that he's deliberately trying to provoke a crisis, and they believe that the Commission is trying to be even-handed. After all, we've just seen 9 days of a hearing against an icon of the apartheid-era struggle, Winnie Mandela, and they think it's only fair that the 81-year-old former president, P.W. Botha, appears in person.
Archbishop Tutu determined then, by all appearances, to press forward with this subpoena.
Yes, he is. He says that they are being even-handed. They're not trying to be vindictive, but this commission must be balanced. We've seen Winnie Mandela taking the stand. Now they want to see P.W. Botha doing the same. But he's already defied this subpoena. There was a technicality on it. They didn't have an exact time when he should appear. So they've issued another one for 2 weeks' time. And if he does not appear, then it's possible they could issue a warrant for his arrest, and he could either face 2 years in prison or he could face a very large fine.
Is there a danger, David, that this Truth and Reconciliation Commission, so-called, is actually going to open up old sores?
Well, it's certainly there to heal old sores, and to do that, they believe they must open those wounds from the apartheid era. That is part of the process. It's a cathartic process. People come before the commission, and it's like going to a confessional. But that process of catharsis and that pain will lead to healing, and that's what they believe. But they want P.W. Botha on the stand because he was the man who was chairing the State Security Council. It was this so-called inner cabinet during the mid-80s, during the state of emergency here, which launched operations against the ANC. Sometimes there were cross-border raids, covert operations by secret units. And the ANC, once he's exposed, they want the truth about them. And that's why they want P.W. Botha on the stand. But the 81-year-old former president is staying behind his high walls in a coastal resort called Wilderness and in the Eastern Cape, and he is simply refusing to cooperate with the commission. He said that Afrikaners only go on their knees before God, and they will not go on his knees before Tutu's commission, as he calls it.
David Chater in Johannesburg, thanks very much. Russian President Boris Yeltsin is being credited today with pushing the budget through the State Duma lower house of parliament. The vote in favour followed his unprecedented personal intervention. The government views the budget as a vital element of its campaign to shake off years of economic depression. But it still has several hurdles to negotiate before being passed to the Federation Council upper house.
A difficult Duma promising yet more delays in the budget. That's how it appeared when they gathered for its first reading. But in Russian politics, a statement of intent rarely has any bearing on fact. The old Kremlin warhorse once again stole a march on his many detractors with an unprecedented appearance at the State Duma. He told them this was the most important day of the year, with the whole world watching while the world's financial markets are in a state of fever. The whole country, all cities and villages are waiting for your decision, he said. Political stability depends on your decision. It appeared to have the desired effect, his mere presence seemingly enough to frighten the legislators into compliance, and the budget was passed in quick time. But it's not just the budget, there are also stocks and shares problems. After the turmoil of Asian markets, foreign money in so-called developing markets like Russia is decidedly jittery. The fear is that a large withdrawal of dollar investment will lead to a collapse in the ruble. It hasn't happened yet, and passing the budget was essential to avoid it.
This is undoubtedly something of a victory for President Yeltsin, but he's not out of the woods yet. This budget has to undergo a number of readings before it is finally passed. But he still has to find millions of pounds to pay millions of workers back wages before the beginning of next year. Stuart Ramsey, Sky News, Moscow.
In London, the Prime Minister has urged